And welcome to Smaulgld. In case you missed it, top gold and silver stories for the weekend of November 5th, 2017. Chinese central bank governor warns again of financial crisis risk. So more cracks appear in China's economy, and we get another warning from a People's Bank of China governor. Gold-backed yuan story continues to be peddled despite no evidence that such a gold-backed yuan is even planned and certainly has not been announced. We got a statement that the economy of China is based on the dollar, something that I've been saying for the past few months about the reliance of China and the world on the dollar, whether they like it or not. Counterfeit Royal Canadian Mint gold was sold at the Royal Bank of Canada, causing some counterfeiting risks and concerns. South Korea to regulate Bitcoin as a commodity. The CME Group announced a Bitcoin futures contract, and Bitcoin price surged from $6,000 to $7,600. The SEC issued a warning to initial coin offering promoters, and gold demand in China remains strong as production wanes, and the U.S. Mint sales remain mired at 10-year lows. These are the stories and others that we're going to cover today in this week's, in case you missed it, top gold and silver stories. So gold closed the week basically flat at $1269.40. The week before it closed at $1273, so we're looking at a less than 4% drop. And silver had a 4% drop from $1684 at the close last week to $1680. However, that was enough, just enough, to get that gold-silver ratio below 75 to 1. For the first time in a few months, it's now at 74.76. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Well, it looks like at the beginning of the week there was an announcement in Cointelegraph that China may be able to start trading Bitcoin again soon, as one of the trading platforms made an announcement that their functionality would begin. There wasn't any follow-on to that story, but I would not be surprised if new and improved and highly super-regulated state-run crypto exchanges become the norm again, or not the norm again, but become the norm in China. Remember, Japan already has regulated Bitcoin exchanges. They have pricing. We've seen South Korea making similar moves, Australia. So it looks like in the Western world, the Asian world, and the European area, they're not looking to clamp down on Bitcoin. They're looking to regulate it. That's what it seems to be, rather than just these outright bans like you see, I think, in Vietnam and a few African nations. I'm not going to go through all the stories. By the way, most of these stories come from my review of the news, which crosses my Twitter feed. I follow a lot of very active people on Twitter, news organizations, and I do manage to pick up a lot of great stories. So thank you, all of you who are on Twitter putting out the news. Here's a story, PetroChina. Now, all this talk about gold-backed yuan, and the idea behind the gold-backed yuan is somehow China is going to burst onto the international scene, internationalize the yuan, game over for the petrodollar. As we've been documenting for the past couple of months here, first of all, that story has no basis in reality. There's no announcement. It's just fantasy, and then people speculate around the fantasy or the fake news that was announced, saying as to why it should happen, how it could happen, what I might be missing in the story. There is no story. But there is a story, actual and documented, that the biggest stock collapse in history is happening in China, and that is at PetroChina. That is China's oil company, and their stock price has lost over almost $1 trillion. Just one little crack in the Chinese economy, but it does highlight that China is not ready for prime time. No way, no how. Now, by the way, talking about the petrodollar, under a lot of people's radars is the fact that the United States, not only with this shale oil boom in the United States, they've allowed exports for the past few years, and the United States is moving up in the league tables as an oil exporter. So if you want oil from the United States, guess what you're going to have to use? Dollars. So, in a sense, the U.S. could become its own petrodollar. This story from CNBC talking about U.S. oil producers moving into the Asian market. This is a development no one is talking about. I wrote about this 2 months ago, showing charts on the increasing U.S. export might in oil. Just a quick aside, all these gold stories that we hear, and the COMEX is going to default, and it's going to be a sovereign size gold buy in 45 days. People forget them. They come and they go, but they get people all excited. They give them false hope. Gold's going to rise because of these stories. I'll tell you this. I think gold is far more likely to skyrocket from a collapse of the Chinese economy than it is on any fake gold-backed yuan story. So if you have a collapse in China, your gold will go higher. The world probably will fall into a depression, but your gold will be worth something. So that's something to think about. That's more likely than this nonsense that China is going to back the gold, the yuan with gold, and allow the oil producers to take the yuan and bring it to the Shanghai Gold Exchange and take gold off the exchange. First of all, China doesn't allow gold to leave the Shanghai Gold Exchange into foreign outside of China. So that's a ridiculous story as it is. And why would they want to allow that? Why would China want to pay for oil in gold that they've managed to accumulate through mining, production, and imports and just give it away to oil producers at this price? Doesn't make any sense. Then they've changed the story. The oil producers are going to take the yuan, which, by the way, the contract is a oil's futures contract. It's for hedging. There's no physical delivery of oil. There's no yuan exchanging. So what they're saying is that the oil producer is going to take the yuan and go buy gold on the COMEX and the LBMA. First of all, that's not a gold-backed yuan. That's just what they choose to do, the oil producers choose to do with their yuan. But second of all, you can't even use yuan to buy gold on the COMEX or the LBMA. The story is searching, stretching to remain relevant. They're trying to keep the story alive any way they can. First, it's gold-backed. Then it's gold convertible. Then it's not convertible on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. They go and they take the yuan and they buy it on the LBMA or COMEX. They keep trying to make the story real, and it's not real. There is no such contract that's being contemplated. What is being contemplated is a yuan-denominated oils futures contract. That's it. That's a big deal in a sense. It's a minor incremental move by China to try to internationalize the yuan. But it is not game over, game changer, petro yuan, and all the other nonsense that you keep hearing about. South Korea's second largest exchange integrates Litecoin. That's good for you Litecoin fans. More trading there. Coin One is the name of the South Korean coin. I think the number one, since they closed down the Chinese exchange, I think the number one exchange is Bithumb in South Korea, and that becomes the number one South Korean and world. Now, did the Royal Canadian Mint certify fake gold? There was a bit of a scare earlier this week about a jeweler who had found a fake bar that he had bought at the Royal Bank of Canada. I think it was in Ottawa. And the stories made it sound like somehow fake gold got into a Canadian Mint wrapper, a bar that was sealed. That's not what happened. What happened was someone counterfeited a Royal Canadian Mint bar and a Royal Canadian Mint wrapper, and it somehow found its way into the Royal Bank of Canada, who sells gold to the public. So either what happened was the bank, Royal Bank of Canada, purchased bad counterfeited gold and then sold it to this jeweler, or an employee at the Royal Bank of Canada brought it in with them and exchanged it for a good bar that they had purchased and sold it. Still highlights that there is an issue with counterfeiting, and just because you buy it from a reputable place, supposedly, from the Royal Bank of Canada, that you're getting good gold. Now, I would say if you're buying directly from the mint, your chances of getting bad gold are probably much, much, much further reduced because there is no chain of custody, hasn't passed hands. The mint, it'd be very hard for somebody to bring in fake bars that look like Canadian Mint bars and swap them out. It's possible, but still, that wouldn't be Canadian Mint produced. That would be the result of a counterfeiter inside the mint. Could happen, though. Never can tell. But that's probably your safest bet if you buy mint direct. So now we're finding out that in China, bastion of freedom, that you can get in a lot of trouble for disrespecting the flag of China. You can get a 3-year sentence. So I wrote out on Twitter here, well, you can get 5 years probably for denying this gold-backed yuan story. I don't think people understand that China is not a free market. They may have some liberalization on who can own what in China, but they are still a top-down command and control censorship type of economy. And as we've seen with the way they run their economy, they centrally plan it and they bring all the demand forward and they build stuff they don't need just to keep people working. It's the old dig ditches and fill them back up just to get people working. Well, they actually produce real things. They've produced a London Bridge that they don't need. They've produced cities that look like Paris that nobody lives in. And then, of course, they've engaged in so many other projects, and that's just to keep the GDP going. But they've borrowed a lot of money. They've got a lot of debt. They have zombie companies that have engaged in projects that haven't made money. And then there's banks that have lended money to these zombie companies that are now zombie banks because they can't get paid back. And guess who backstops and foots the whole bill? The Chinese government. So they have massive debt in the system. And again, if you think the U.S. can't sustain its debt, no reason to believe that China can sustain its debt, because China has actually not just paid for the livings like the United States is doing for its Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security. China is actually buying growth, which the European, U.S., and Japanese companies really aren't doing. They're just trying to stay afloat with minor growth. China is really trying to keep the wheels on a speeding train by borrowing money. And as you'll see when we get to the Chinese Board of Governor warning, they're very concerned that they've already overdone it. They've already passed the point of no return. So any bold move that you think China's going to make about the yuan with gold, it's crazy to begin with, but not at this time. At this time, China is not in any position to be making bold moves when their economy is fragile as it is. This is a reference to Paul Manafort. I think he was indicted by this Robert Mueller investigation. And I think I wrote here, he filed papers to run for president to avoid trial or prison time, referring to Hillary Clinton, who clearly has had her own issues as well. And I think the fact that she ran for president probably shielded her from a lot of potential, at the time, investigation. Or maybe she was going to be shielded anyway. I don't know. Now, on this counterfeiting thing, it is an interesting, because I think Franklin Roosevelt said it's probably a spurious attribution, but I think he said something like, in politics, nothing ever happens by accident. It happens, or coincidence, it happens for a reason. And you probably should know, because I think Pearl Harbor was something that they were well aware of, that they were going to have a surprise attack. Putting that aside, just happens that U.S. congressmen are asking the U.S. Mint to fight counterfeiting. Seems like they're out there trying to make it sound like, be afraid of buying physical metals because you could get ripped off. There's counterfeiters. Congress is trying to help you, but, if you got to buy this metal stuff, maybe you should buy an ETF. And now you don't have to worry about it. Just passing thought, but a little coincidental that you have this very publicized Canadian Mint counterfeit story, and then you have the congressman U.S. Mint saying fight counterfeit, and at a time when you have very low U.S. Mint sales. So we are seeing a lot of counterfeit stories now, and people becoming aware of, in addition to the potential that the price may go down, it may go to zero because you may not have actual physical gold or silver in your possession because of the potential that you bought counterfeit gold. Now here's another story. Royal Canadian Police to probe selling a fake gold bar. Canadian Mint says not their gold bar. That you got to believe, because it looks like this was a bank mistake, not a mistake at the Royal Canadian Mint. Now here, daggers are falling from the sky. China's stocks, bonds tumble after National Congress ends. It's interesting. They just had their 5-year planning session, and they told all the companies, no, don't report any bad news. Don't report any bad news. You know, we got to have everything looking straight. They had the country on lockdown during this because they want to push this image to the world, this almost Potemkin village, that everything is fine in China. Don't report any bad news. Don't do any short selling. Here's the Chinese central bank chief. There he is, right? Look at him. He just happens to appear. China's central bank chief urges Beijing to promote equity, cut debt, eliminate zombie companies. That's the guy I'm talking about. He's like the equivalent of, I don't know, Bullard or maybe even Yellen. I think he's one of the top central bank governors. He definitely is. I don't think he's the #1 guy. And the other thing is he's resigning. So I guess he's speaking his mind. It's almost like what Greenspan did after he resigned, started warning. But this guy actually is still there. He's wagging the finger right there, telling you, watch out. Here's a story. I didn't make this one up. China's yuan firms on corporate dollar sales for winning month. So this shows that China's economy is intricately linked to dollars and treasuries. They use the dollar, they raise funds in dollars at the state-owned enterprises, and when they sell dollars, they boost the yuan. That's how they do it. In order to boost the yuan, they got to have a lot of dollars to sell. And then, of course, once they've sold off a lot, then they got to buy more. So right now, China has $1.2 trillion in U.S. treasuries. They're not dumping them. They just added about $250 billion worth in the last 6 months. Because they spent a lot of dollars, sold a lot of dollars to support the yuan. Now they've got to buy them to weaken the yuan. And also when they have the dollars, they've got better credit. So it's a very, it's not binary. It's not dump dollars, go yuan, down goes the dollar. They're all in this together. They've got to keep things within a range. And since China's economy is big, China's borrowing needs are big, they got to have a big dollar position. Even Russia has $118 billion in U.S. treasuries. That's more than they have worth in gold. Even though they've got the 5th largest gold hoard at 1,779 tons, that's only worth $75 billion. So, better for worse, the world does run on dollars, whether they like it or not. Here's interesting. U.S. scolds China for distorting market ahead of Trump's Asia trip. That's just, as I just mentioned, China was on lockdown. They're trying to make everything look pretty. And, they're trying to pretend they're a market economy. Really, they're not. They are a centrally planned one. U.S. consumer confidence just hit its highest level in almost 17 years. So this was an interesting one. You had consumer confidence hitting a 17-year high. Then you had another poll saying people think this is the darkest period in American history. So, and then somebody responded to me. I said, how do you square these two on Twitter? And he said, oh, you can separate. He says, I think that my finances are really good, but this president is an embarrassment and we've never been worse. And I thought, I don't know if you can separate the two. I mean, there could be a little truth in both, but I don't think you could be on the extreme of the highest consumer confidence and the lowest outlook for the country, because they're somewhat linked for the most part. It's the economy, stupid, as the 1992 Clinton campaign won with. I mean, basically said you got to realize that's what people care a lot, if not most. Economic issues are always close to the top, so I don't see how you can have us in the darkest period when you have this consumer confidence at 17-year highs. You can have complaints, but it doesn't make it the worst. Now, this is earlier in the week. This is October 31st. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Halloween, going backwards. Bitcoin surges to above 6,400 after the CME Group announced the launch of a futures digital currency. They didn't really announce the launch. They announced the fact that they're preparing for a launch. They seem to have this, I wouldn't say it's arrogance, it's just a fact. They're pretty confident it's going to get approved. And but it hasn't been, it's not out yet. There is another company, Ledger X, that already provides futures trading. This is a small company. This is going to be a big deal. This will attract the big, well, this is what, October 31st. Today is November 5th. Price is already up $1,200 since then. It's now at $7,600 this morning at about 11 o'clock on November 5th. But this was interesting. You might want to click on this. This is CME Group Duffy. He's saying he was getting pressured by the CNBC people to say, look, isn't this a Ponzi scheme? Isn't this a fraud? And he said, no, we have clients that want this, not just for speculation, but we have clients that want to use and are interested in Bitcoin. This leads me to believe that you don't have to have 100% buy-in or even 50% buy-in from institutional investors of Wall Street. You just need some of them. And if some of them want in on this, there's not very many Bitcoin, so I can see this thing going higher just on that supply-demand. It's not because the world endorses it. It doesn't need to. Only a small amount of money on a grand scheme, needs to move into Bitcoin, and it's going to go higher. And that's, I guess, what Bloomberg is saying. Futures could open floodgates for institutional investors. I agree with that. I can't argue with that. Here's a story. Russians Medvedev says the world shouldn't be dominated by one currency. I don't disagree with that. And they're going to launch a payment system. Just because it shouldn't be doesn't mean it won't be. And that's, I guess, the reality of how I look at these things, that, I want to be vice president of the world, and I'm not. I should be, but I'm not. And probably won't be. So we'll see what happens there. And we'll see also that these central planners, while they can't outsmart the market, they are pretty smart. Russia, China. And they know, as part of their planning, they're not going to dethrone the dollar in December. They know it's going to take time. China's officials have said it's going to take time. They may never get there. But their plan isn't to just say, gold back yuan, game changer, shock the world, December 24th, whatever day they pick. They may pick a date to launch a yuan-denominated futures contract. They're not going to launch a yuan-denominated convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Game changer. No. But here's interesting. China's appetite for gold is back, led by bullions, wedding, and jewelry. It's a point we've been making all year. The People's Bank of China isn't adding gold, but we're seeing very robust Hong Kong imports. We're seeing strong gold demand within China. And we've also seen a bit of a drop-off in their world-leading gold production. So this shows that the physical gold market doesn't have anything to do with the price, because supply-demand, you would be going up. Here, China's January-September gold output down 9.88%, so down 10% this year so far. Where are the Bitcoin pumpers? How come they're not talking about a Bitcoin-backed yuan and yuan exchangeable for Bitcoin on OKCoin? Game changer. We're not seeing that. You see, the Bitcoiners right now, they were pumping and pumping and pumping for years and telling you it was the only thing in town. And now they don't have to pump at all. The thing just goes up a few $100s a day. Here's an interesting story. Uncrackable phone screens might be coming soon thanks to graphene and silver. These are cool. The screen is like flexible, and it's some kind of silver, nano, and graphene. And now, you would say, well, this is going to lead to a lot of silver demand. Not really, because there's even less silver in this. I mean, there's very little silver in this type of thing. But it still shows how versatile silver is. But I always like to point out that just because silver is useful, so is copper, so are a lot of things. If silver ever gets too expensive, they will find ways to either eliminate it and use all graphene, or to use less of it, like in the solar panels, or to not use it at all. So you can't extrapolate out that silver is useful. Silver has these applications. If we just 10x these applications, that 10x is the amount of demand. We don't have 10 times more silver. Game over. Silver is going to be $1,000. No. No company would ever pay that. They would find ways, or they would just abandon a product that has silver in it, or they'd come up with an alternative product. Most likely, they don't abandon anything like solar. They just figure out other ways to use less silver. There's actually one product on the market that uses aluminum, and they come up with ways to make that more effective. They're coming up with ways to use less silver in the paste. So in any event, you can't just listen to people who tell you that silver is valuable. For example, more and more electronics have silver in them. Yes, but did you know over the last 10 years, the amount of silver used in electronics has declined? Why? There's more electronics, but why has it declined? They're smaller electronics. They use less silver. They also figure out how to use less silver. There he is, Gerald Celente. Gold back yuan. Okay, that was one of the stories of the week. And there's another one, Russia Today. Gold back yuan. They love talking about this. You can't, I have heard back from anybody. I've pointed this out to people that there is no source for this story. The only one who responded was Mike Maloney from Gold Money. Not Gold Money? No, it's from goldsilver.com. And he said on one of his interviews, on one of his videos, source, well, I'll give you a source. He trots out the Nikkei Asian review story that doesn't have a source in it. So far, no one's been able to present a source for that story. Now, the next one was, if you remember, massive physical gold buying won't shock the world. This was back in July of 2017 when a story was circulating that there was going to be this massive physical buy in 45 days, and it was going to shock the world. So shocking of the world. In fact, I did a story when that came out saying massive physical gold buying won't shock the world. And I even identified what the secret sovereign-sized buy was going to be, and it was some type of crypto gold-backed currency that I think the guy who was saying was going to shock the world had some knowledge of. They were going to, and I knew they were not going to go out and buy massive tonnage on a given day, 45 days, to coincide with the launch. Because if you're going to do a currency backed by something, you're not going to. I'm sorry. I knew this was a false story. It's obvious it was a false story. It is a false story. Nothing happened. And I even noted that even if they were to have a buy of that size, it wouldn't do anything to the price of gold. Because as I was showing at the time, you get those types of buys, imports into China and India every now and then, and nothing happens to the price. And by the way, we never even saw a buy of that size from this cryptocurrency. I don't even know if they even launched it. All right, so here's an interesting story that Turkey's been buying gold. Everyone's getting excited about it, but the thing is, they sold gold last year. So, you know, when they say they bought a record $13 billion worth of gold, that's not a lot of gold. I mean, it's not a lot of money, $13 billion. I mean, if you had it, it is, but in the overall scheme of international finance, it is nothing. So I wouldn't get too excited about that. SEC issues statement on potentially unlawful promotion of initial coin offerings. They're talking about here, there was a guy, I think it was Mayweather, the fighter who retired. He fought his last fight against some mixed martial arts guy. He was promoting some ICO. But they're also talking about individuals, you know, getting on YouTube and talking about an ICO and getting paid by the promoter of the ICO. You know, that could be a violation of these touting laws where you don't disclose that you've got this hot IPO, and meanwhile, the guy who wrote the white paper is giving you 10 grand, 5 grand, I don't know what they give these people to promote them. But I think it's okay. You'd have to check with your legal advisor. I think it's okay to promote them, but you have to clearly state that you are promoting them, that you're getting paid to promote them, and you probably even have to give all kinds of warnings. And anyway, as I mentioned, if you're interested in doing that, you should talk to a lawyer before embarking on any promoting of ICOs directly, if you're getting paid especially. Here you go, because gold back yuan, this is the name of the company. Ding Dong Dang Dong was the first Chinese company to default after the party's Congress. They've probably been a zombie company for years. I don't know anything about this company, but they were probably told, do not announce this during our Congress, and finally, bingo, they came out with their default. China to send people who mock the country's national anthem to prison. There you go. Very nice, China. Failing state. This is in the economy. A rash of bankruptcies hit Chinese lenders backed by state firms. But gold-backed yuan, it's going to change the game. Game changer. This was interesting. When I read a paper by the CME group talking about Bitcoin, they called it a store of value. I was kind of surprised that CME group would call it a store of value. And in the argument that it was a store of value, they kept referring to gold. They basically tied Bitcoin to the hip with gold, and makes sense for them because they have a gold futures contract and they're trying to tell the regulators Bitcoin's just like gold, digital gold. Here's irony. Banks staying away from the Bitcoin bubble due to money laundering, Credit Suisse CEO says. No, banks, dollars, they use them, and money laundering, that's what happens at many banks. It's strange to blame Bitcoin for money laundering when you can money launder basically anything of value, especially cash. Bitcoin no different, but that's, to me, no reason to stay away from it. It is a reason for law enforcement to try to follow it, but anything of value can be used. I read that they were using trips, exotic vacations to bribe people. I mean, you can do anything. That's happening in India. So just because you eliminate cash doesn't mean people won't find a way to find other ways to break the law. There you go. Venezuela announces it will default, restructure all debt after tomorrow's final payment. And all the people, oh, but they're taking yuan for oil. So what? They're going to sell oil, they're going to get yuan, and immediately they're going to go to the facility and flip that into dollars and pay off their creditors. So it's not going to internationalize the yuan one bit. It's not the end of the petrodollar. This one I'm not going to go over, but this is Lloyd Blankfeld. Interesting comments on his views on Bitcoin, and they're not what you'd expect them to be, so check that out. Central bankers on the move, but where's inflation? Now, this is a tone-deaf headline. Where's the inflation? Well, how about rent, tuition, real estate, stocks, bonds, cryptocurrencies? The way they measure inflation is really ridiculous. Sorry for that. What else we got here? Yeah, read it on the Asian Nikkei Review. Heard it on social media. Must be true. That's your gold-backed yuan. Well, yeah, here's another one. There's another group here. They did a video. Just we saw Salente. We saw Russia Today as McElhaney's ICA. China aims to dethrone the dollar through yuan oil trade backed by gold. Everyone's just parroting that story. Parroting that story. There's your 3-year jail term. I was on Wall Street for Main Street. You could check that out with Jason. We talked about China, a lot of stuff we just covered here, but in more depth there. 2 + 2 is gold was the blog post I put out after I was on the show, just basically reposting the video. Cranberry-backed dollar is a game changer, analysts say. This is a story that China has become a huge fan and importer of U.S. cranberries. So, is the dollar now backed by cranberries? Here's another one, parroting the gold-backed yuan story. I think that's the same one we just saw. Only was republished on SGT Report. So it's not only do these people parrot the story, but then the story gets parroted on different sites. So let's say X group comes out and puts out gold-backed yuan, game changer for the dollar, will shock the world, end of the petrodollar, end of dollar hegemony. Okay, he gets that out there. Then all the social alternative financial sites and their YouTubes, they'll republish it. And then another company will come out, another guy will come out, and they'll all say the same thing. Then the guy will go on and give an interview on this channel, on that channel. Maybe the same guy will go on 6 channels and give the same interview about the gold-backed yuan. And then it'll get republished on all the different channels. And you can see how that echo chamber, people just believe in the gold-backed yuan story. Before we close off, this one is the one from Russia Today. Now, the headline was about Russia and China trying to get around the dollar. But at the very end of the article, they mentioned this guy from he's Russian political science. And he said, gradually, Russia and China are moving away from the U.S. dollar. But then he says what I say. This is a process that can take 15 to 20 years. It's not going to happen in December, as the economy of China is based on the dollar. And then he mentions the currency reserves of China are over $3 trillion in July 2017. Each Chinese household owes up to $2,000 in U.S. government bonds. I don't think he means each household. I think he means if you spread it out per capita. But that's still a lot. And under these circumstances, it's unlikely that Beijing will collapse the dollar. Of course they won't. It's not in their interest to do so, and they couldn't really do it unless they wanted to. They don't want to. Just at the end of the week, Prince Alawid says, he said, well, this guy got arrested. A lot of the top princes in Saudi Arabia got arrested. I'm still following this. I have no idea what's going on there. But earlier in the week, the guy said that Bitcoin was a bubble, implode. It was like Enron. And, well, maybe he paid for his blasphemy against Bitcoin. Chinese Zhao warns on rising financial risk in blunt article. So he comes out again. He already wrote an article, and now he comes out again this week and basically says Chinese financial system is getting significantly more vulnerable due to high leverage. No joke there. And he warns about these zombie companies. So to stave off a financial crisis, he said we should broaden equity funding and direct financing to reduce corporate leverage and eliminate zombie companies, and market should play a decisive role in allocating financial resources as long as the government approves of that allocation, I'm sure. There's some other, check out the Smaulgld channel. I put out the Last Silver Empire. It's more of a history on the use of silver in the United States. I did a YouTube on the Royal Canadian Mint and their counterfeit issue. There's the updated U.S. Mint gold and silver sales numbers, and then there's the CME group. And also, I did an interview with Mark Battaglia. He talks about how social media is an echo chamber without a memory. And that's about it, other than you could check out the link to my interview with Jason on Wall Street for Main Street. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you during the week.